She ran marathons at 48. By 52, she had 3 diagnoses, no family history, no warning signs. Doctors were baffled, but they shouldn't have been. What happens inside a woman's body after 50 is one of medicine's most overlooked stories, and what you don't know could already be happening to you. Welcome back. If you are watching this right now, there is a very good chance that either you or someone you love has experienced this exact thing. A woman who was careful about what she ate, who exercised regularly, who never smoked, who took care of herself, and then somewhere around her early 50s, everything changed. Her energy disappeared. Her weight shifted without explanation. Her joints started aching. A routine blood test came back with numbers that had never been a problem before. And the most devastating part? Nobody could fully explain why. Today we are going to explain why. We are going to go deep into the biology, the research, and the real-world patterns that medicine has been slow to acknowledge. And by the time this video ends, you will not only understand exactly what is happening inside a woman's body after 50i, you will know what to do about it. Stay with us because what we are about to share in the next few minutes might be the most important health information you have heard in years. Let us start with something that seems almost unfair. The women who are most blindsided by illness after 50 are often the ones who are doing everything right. And that is not a coincidence. It is actually part of the problem. Here is what happens. A woman spends her 30s and 40s building healthy habits. She watches her diet. She manages her stress as best she can. She gets her annual checkups. Everything looks good on paper. And then, as she crosses into her 50s, she begins to notice things. Fatigue that sleep does not fix. Weight that accumulates around her abdomen despite no change in her diet. A brain that feels slower, foggier, less sharp than it used to be. Joints that protest in ways they never did before. And here is the dangerous part. Because she has always been healthy, she dismisses these signs. She tells herself she is just getting older. She tells her doctor, and sometimes her doctor tells her the same thing. According to data from the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, women over 50 account for a staggering proportion of new chronic disease diagnoses every single year. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune disorders, osteoporosis, thyroid disease. These conditions do not appear randomly. They cluster around this specific window in a woman's life, and there is a very precise biological reason for that. In the United Kingdom, research from the British Heart Foundation has confirmed that a woman's risk of cardiovascular disease rises sharply in the decade following menopause. In Australia and Canada, similar patterns are documented across metabolic and bone health data. This is not a regional trend. This is a global biological reality that is affecting hundreds of millions of women, and it is still not being talked about loudly enough. The question is not whether this happens. The question is why, and more importantly, can it be stopped? Here is what we need to understand first. For most of a woman's adult life, her body has had a powerful, largely invisible protector. And after 50, that protection begins to disappear. The protector we are talking about is estrogen. And before you think this is just about hot flashes and night sweats, stay with us. Because what estrogen actually does in the body goes so far beyond reproduction that most women are genuinely shocked when they learn the full picture. Estrogen is one of the most powerful regulatory hormones in the human body. It does not simply manage the menstrual cycle. It actively protects the lining of your arteries, keeping them flexible and resistant to plaque buildup. It supports bone density by regulating the cells that build and break down bone. It modulates insulin sensitivity, helping your body process sugar efficiently. It influences the production of serotonin and dopamine in your brain, which is why mood changes are so common around menopause. It regulates inflammatory pathways throughout the body. It even influences the health of your gut bacteria. When estrogen declines, and during perimenopause and menopause it can drop by as much as 90% from its peak levels, all of these systems lose their hormonal support simultaneously, not one at a time, all at once. And this is why women often describe the feeling of suddenly falling apart across multiple areas of health at the same time. It is not a coincidence. It is biology removing a single keystone that was holding up an enormous structure. Let us talk about what happens to the heart first, because this is the one that surprises women the most. Before menopause, women have significantly lower rates of heart disease than men of the same age. Estrogen keeps arteries supple, raises good cholesterol, and keeps inflammation low. It is one of nature's most elegant cardiovascular protections. But after menopause, that advantage disappears. Within 10 years of menopause, a woman's risk of heart disease equals, and in some measures, exceeds that of men her age. The American Heart Association reports that heart disease is the #1 killer of women in the United States. And yet, because it is so strongly associated with men in the public imagination, women's heart attacks are frequently misdiagnosed or dismissed entirely. Women are more likely to experience heart attack symptoms that do not fit the classic chest-clutching image: jaw pain, nausea, fatigue, back pain. And studies have repeatedly shown that women's cardiac symptoms are more often attributed to anxiety or digestive issues by healthcare providers. Now let us talk about bone. Most people know that osteoporosis is common in older women, but very few people understand just how fast it happens. In the first 5 years following menopause, a woman can lose up to 20% of her bone density, not 20% over a lifetime, 20% in 5 years. Estrogen normally signals bone-building cells to stay active. Without it, bone breakdown outpaces bone building, and the skeleton weakens far faster than most women realize. This is why fractures, particularly hip fractures, become so dangerous in women over 60. A hip fracture in a woman over 70 carries a mortality risk of up to 30% within the following year. These are not small numbers. Then there is metabolism. Many women over 50 describe eating exactly the same way they always have, exercising the same amount, and still gaining weight, particularly around the abdomen. They are not imagining this. As estrogen declines, the body's sensitivity to insulin decreases, meaning glucose is processed less efficiently and more of it is converted to fat. At the same time, visceral fat, the dangerous fat that accumulates around internal organs, increases even when total body weight stays the same. Visceral fat is not passive. It actively produces inflammatory chemicals that raise the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and even certain cancers. And then there is the thyroid. This is one of the most underappreciated pieces of the puzzle. Thyroid disorders, particularly hypothyroidism, increase dramatically in women after 50. The symptoms: fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, depression, joint pain, cold sensitivity, overlap almost perfectly with menopause symptoms. This means that thousands of women are either having thyroid disease dismissed as menopause or having genuine menopausal symptoms dismissed as thyroid-related, when in many cases both things are happening at the same time. If you are a woman over 50 and you have not had a comprehensive thyroid panel, not just TSH, but free T3, free T4, and thyroid antibodies, please write that down and ask your doctor at your next visit. Before we move on, there is one more piece of this biological puzzle that we have to talk about, because it connects everything together. Here is the part that most doctors still are not putting together clearly enough. The hormonal changes of menopause do not happen in isolation. They happen inside a body that is also dealing with a very particular set of life circumstances, and those circumstances make everything dramatically worse. Think about the life of the average woman in her early 50s. She may be navigating the tail end of a demanding career. She is very likely dealing with the health of aging parents. She may have adult children who still need significant support. She is experiencing menopausal symptoms that disrupt her sleep. She is processing a significant identity shift around her body, her fertility, and her sense of self. And she is often doing all of this while still being the emotional center of her family. This is what researchers call the sandwich generation effect, and it has a direct, measurable impact on physiology. Chronic psychological stress triggers the sustained release of cortisol. And here is something critical. Cortisol and estrogen have an inverse relationship. When cortisol is chronically elevated, it suppresses the remaining estrogen production that the body is still trying to maintain. In other words, chronic stress biologically accelerates menopause. It pulls the rug out faster. And because cortisol also raises blood pressure, promotes visceral fat storage, impairs immune function, and disrupts sleep, the compounding effect on a post-menopausal woman's body is enormous. Speaking of sleep, let us spend a moment here because this is genuinely one of the most damaging hidden factors. Menopause fundamentally alters sleep architecture. Night sweats disrupt deep sleep. Hormonal changes reduce the amount of restorative slow-wave sleep the brain gets each night. And the consequences of chronic poor sleep are not just feeling tired. Sleep deprivation in postmenopausal women has been directly linked to elevated inflammatory markers, impaired glucose metabolism, accelerated cognitive decline, and weakened immune response. Research published in the journal Sleep found that women experiencing menopause-related sleep disruption had significantly higher levels of C-reactive protein, one of the key markers of systemic inflammation, than women who slept well. Telling a woman over 50 that poor sleep is just part of aging is not medical advice. It is a missed opportunity to intervene in a measurable health risk. Now, here is something that is just beginning to make headlines in the medical research world, and it is fascinating. Inside the gut, there is a specialized community of bacteria called the estrobolome. These bacteria help regulate how estrogen is metabolized and recycled in the body. When the gut microbiome is healthy, the estrobolome supports healthy estrogen levels. When it is disrupted, through poor diet, antibiotic use, chronic stress, or simply the aging process, estrogen metabolism is thrown off in ways that can contribute to weight gain, mood disorders, inflammation, and even increased cancer risk. A 2023 study published in Nature Reviews found significant shifts in the gut microbiome composition of postmenopausal women compared to premenopausal women of similar ages, specifically in bacterial strains associated with inflammation and metabolic regulation. This is a relatively new frontier, but the implications are significant. And then there are nutritional deficiencies. And this is something that almost every woman over 50 should take seriously, regardless of how healthy her diet is. After 50, the body absorbs vitamins and minerals less efficiently. Vitamin D absorption declines. The stomach produces less acid, which impairs B12 absorption. Magnesium, which is essential for sleep, heart rhythm, muscle function, and glucose metabolism, is chronically low in a large percentage of older women. Iron levels can shift in unpredictable ways depending on whether a woman has fully completed menopause. And here is the insidious parts. The symptoms of vitamin D deficiency, B12 deficiency, and magnesium deficiency look almost identical to the general picture of aging poorly. Fatigue, brain fog, muscle weakness, depression, poor sleep, and increased illness. These deficiencies are highly correctable, but only if someone thinks to test for them. If your doctor is not routinely checking these levels at your annual appointment, ask them to. Now, we need to have an honest conversation about something uncomfortable, because understanding why women become sick after 50 is not just a biology story. It is also a story about how medicine has historically treated women's health. And the consequences of that approach are still being felt today. Until 1993, women were systematically and officially excluded from the majority of major clinical trials in the United States. The National Institutes of Health did not require the inclusion of women in federally funded research until that year. What this means in practice is that an enormous body of medical knowledge, about drug dosing, about disease presentation, about diagnostic criteria, was built almost entirely on male bodies and male biology. Dosing recommendations for common medications were calibrated on male physiology. Descriptions of heart attack symptoms were written based on how men experience them. Risk calculators for cardiovascular disease were validated primarily in male populations. The field has made progress since then, but the legacy of those decades of exclusion is still embedded in medical training, in diagnostic tools, and in clinical assumptions, and it shows up in the data. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that women experiencing heart attacks were significantly less likely than men to receive timely and appropriate treatment. Research from the Mayo Clinic found that women with autoimmune diseases wait an average of nearly 5 years longer than men to receive a correct diagnosis, in part because autoimmune symptoms in women were historically more likely to be attributed to emotional or psychological causes. This is not about blaming individual doctors. The vast majority of physicians are doing their best with the training and tools they have. This is about a structural gap in the medical system, and knowing about that gap is your first line of defense. Because if the system has blind spots, then you need to know where those blind spots are so that you can advocate for yourself. So what does effective self-advocacy look like? It starts with knowing what to ask for. If you are a woman over 50, a comprehensive annual assessment should ideally include more than a basic blood panel. You should be asking about a full thyroid panel. TSH, free T3, free T4, and thyroid antibodies. Not just TSH alone, which misses a significant percentage of thyroid problems. You should be asking about fasting insulin, not just fasting glucose, because insulin resistance can be present for years before blood sugar becomes abnormal. You should be asking about high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, which measures systemic inflammation at a level that predicts cardiovascular risk far earlier than standard cholesterol panels alone. You should be asking about vitamin D, B12, and magnesium. If you are not yet experiencing fractures but have risk factors for bone loss, ask about a DEXA scan to measure bone density. And if you are experiencing significant menopausal symptoms, ask about a hormonal consultation, because the conversation around menopausal hormone therapy has shifted significantly in the past decade. And the blanket fear that followed the Women's Health Initiative study in 2002 has been substantially revised by more recent, nuanced research. Do not wait for your doctor to bring these things up. Bring a list. Ask the questions. A good physician will welcome the engagement. Here is the part that matters most, because everything we have talked about so far leads to one essential question. What can you actually do about it? The answer is a great deal. And the science is very clear on this. The first and most powerful intervention is resistance training, not walking, not light yoga, though both are valuable, but actual strength training with progressive resistance. After 50, muscle mass declines at a rate of approximately 1 to 2% per year through a process called sarcopenia. Muscle is not just about strength. Muscle is the body's primary site of glucose disposal, meaning that strong muscles dramatically improve insulin sensitivity and metabolic health. Muscle protects bones by putting beneficial mechanical stress on them. Muscle mass is one of the strongest predictors of longevity and functional independence in older adults. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that resistance training 2 to 3 times per week significantly reduced all-cause mortality risk in women over 50. If you do nothing else with the information in this video, start a resistance training program. It does not have to be complicated. Bodyweight exercises, resistance bands, or light weights done consistently are enormously effective. The second intervention is managing inflammation through diet. The postmenopausal body is more susceptible to chronic inflammation, and diet is one of the most direct levers available. the dietary pattern with the strongest evidence for reducing inflammation and chronic disease risk in postmenopausal women is the Mediterranean-style diet. Abundant vegetables, legumes, whole grains, healthy fats particularly from olive oil and fatty fish, limited processed foods, and minimal added sugar. Specific foods that have shown particular benefit in women's postmenopausal health include fatty fish rich in omega-3s, which reduce cardiovascular inflammation, fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, and kimchi, which support gut microbiome health, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, which support liver detoxification pathways, and foods rich in phytoestrogens like flax seeds and edamame, which provide very mild estrogenic activity that may soften some menopausal symptoms for some women. The third intervention is sleep, and treating it as a non-negotiable medical priority. This means maintaining a consistent sleep schedule 7 days a week. It means making the bedroom cold, dark, and completely screen-free. It means addressing night sweats actively, whether through breathable bedding, cooling mattress pads, or a conversation with your doctor about options for managing vasomotor symptoms. If you are waking repeatedly during the night despite good sleep hygiene, ask your doctor about a sleep study. Sleep apnea in women is significantly underdiagnosed and increases sharply after menopause. The fourth is stress regulation. And we need to be honest that this goes beyond bubble baths and breathing exercises, though both have their place. The most evidence-supported approaches for reducing cortisol chronically include regular physical activity, which directly lowers cortisol and raises mood-regulating neurotransmitters. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, which has been studied specifically in menopausal women and shown to reduce both perceived stress and inflammatory markers, and social connection, which is one of the most powerful modulators of stress biology that exists. Loneliness and social isolation in women over 50 are associated with significantly elevated inflammatory markers and increased all-cause mortality. Maintaining close relationships is not a luxury, it is a health imperative. And finally, get your numbers checked. Know your baseline. Know your thyroid, your vitamin levels, your fasting insulin, your bone density. If you have risk factors, you cannot manage what you do not measure. Let us come back to where we started. The woman who ran marathons at 48 and had 3 diagnoses by 52. What happened to her was not random. It was not simply bad luck. It was the predictable result of a powerful hormonal protection being withdrawn from multiple body systems at once, compounded by life stress, disrupted sleep, nutritional gaps, and a medical system that still has significant blind spots when it comes to women's health after 50. But here is what is also true. None of this is inevitable. The biology is real, but the trajectory is not fixed. Women who understand what is happening in their bodies, who ask the right questions, make targeted lifestyle interventions, and advocate for comprehensive care, have a fundamentally different health outcome than women who are left in the dark. You are not getting older. You are navigating one of the most complex biological transitions the human body goes through, and you deserve a complete picture of what that means and what you can do about it. Share this video with a woman in your life who needs to hear it, because the conversation that medicine has been too slow to have, we can start having ourselves.